The following story has some of the names changed to protect the innocent victims of this scam. I never knew I could hate someone so much. I truly wanted him dead. I suppose I had never been tested like this before. As a professional Christian, the whole ordeal taught me how far I'm from being who I tell myself I should be. Through all my life, I have heard the words of Jesus: love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I somehow justified to myself that they did not apply to this low-life scammer. When I finally reached the deepest pit of that dark torment and at least tried to sincerely pray for my persecutor, the proof that revealed this faker finally arrived on my computer screen and the ordeal ended. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me briefly set the stage. My wife of 26 years, Kate, had been through one medical nightmare after another since July of 2013. There is no need to go into the details, but the result was this once workaholic professional now had to retire early on Social Security disability. For several months, she was mostly homebound and alone during the day when I went to work. She was ripe to fall for anyone who would give her some attention. This brings us to late 2016. At home, with her iPad, Kate had been making friends on Facebook with a few soldiers stationed overseas, especially in Syria. They explained that they had found her while searching for a friend on Facebook. Kate was very sociable and enjoyed chatting online with these guys. She also felt she was helping with the morale of our soldiers by being a friend. I'm not sure how many soldiers or other men she was chatting with. One soldier sent roses to our home. He then asked for $400 for something and she promptly blocked him. Then along came a non-soldier. He called himself Williams Humphry. He said that he saw her angelic face on Facebook and sent a friend request. She told me about him. I thought it was strange. What kind of first name is Williams? That's a last name. After chatting online for a few weeks, he began to call Kate from his cell phone. A search of this number said the calls were from Texas, although he was supposedly in Miami Beach. He would also email her from an Outlook email address and then soon changed it to a Gmail, but the last name of Humphreys was spelled different. That told me he didn't seem to know how to spell his own last name. That should have been a red flag, but I was ignorant of romance scams at the time and ignorant of the concept of catfishing in general. For live chatting purposes, they used Facebook Messenger, but later moved to Google Hangouts. Kate was mostly interested in discussing his children. He called her honey and dear and even my queen, but he knew she had a husband. His daughter Mackenzie was 14 and his son George was 8. His wife, by the way, had died several years earlier in a car accident. Kate talked with Mackenzie on occasion. They talked about her schoolwork, friends, and her grief over her mother. George was shy and would never come to the phone. Williams was an engineer who mostly built bridges. He often had contracts that sent him and his children overseas. These overseas contracts had made him very well off financially. He said he just bought a home in Miami Beach and even gave the address, and according to Zillow, this house was worth millions. At one point in November of 2016, Kate was excited because she had made plans to visit them in Miami for New Year's Eve. She ordered an expensive dress online just for the occasion. I was thinking at the time it might be good for her to get away without me and enjoy her new friends. As a show of how much he valued their friendship, Williams sent her an email listing a trove of gifts he wanted to send her. The gifts were Louis Vuitton purses and lots of jewelry, all worth thousands of dollars. In fact, he also wanted to ship a new Honda Accord, but Kate let him know she didn't need a new car. Supposedly, all these gifts were to be delivered by a company called Orange Courier, which is a real courier company based out of California. When it was time to deliver, she received an email from Orange Courier, but not the real company, that she said she had to pay $890 for shipping. Not only that, but the payment had to be sent Western Union to somebody in South Africa. We both thought it was strange that he could afford thousands of dollars in gifts, but then not pay for the shipping. Also, even if we did pay for the shipping, why don't we pay the shipping company? Why send it to an individual employee via Western Union? The email was full of grammatical errors. and mentioned sending the money to a male in one sentence and to a female in the next. Kate looked up Orange Courier and found a customer service person who basically let her know it was a fraud. And for one thing, they don't use Gmail to conduct business. Kate let Williams know all this, and he played dumb. Needless to say, he never decided to send the gifts and pay for the shipping. Also, the trip to Miami was off because he and his family were now in London on a job. They did not communicate for a while, but at some point he wormed his way back into her confidence. Until about February 2017, he seemed to have two Facebook accounts. One that says he lives in New York, and one that says he lives in Florida. The Florida one is the one that Kate was talking to him with. Supposedly, the New York one was old, and he no longer used it. Of course, they are both long closed by Facebook. I noticed the URL for the first time on the Facebook profile, which is General David Rodriguez, in the link. David Rodriguez was one of the military friends she had several months earlier, but now it's Williams Humphry. At some point, Kate asked him to send a video of himself talking to her and saying her name, which he never did. He sent her other pictures and a video where he does not mention her name and was very generic in what he says. He refused to FaceTime. On the phone, he had a very heavy African accent, and his voice didn't fit the picture of the guy at all. Also, in the generic videos, he had no accent and sounds nothing like the guy on the phone. I never understood why Kate didn't acknowledge this. It was so clear that the guy in the pictures was not the guy she was talking to. Red flags were flying all over, but Kate seemed by now to be brainwashed. The term I have since heard is under the ether. Eventually, he supposedly got a great construction contract in Nigeria, so he moved his family and himself there. But he hadn't taken care of some details with the contract and license, and he was very mad at himself. In Nigeria, he didn't have access to his own money and needed $6,900 because equipment was blocked in customs. The contract was about to expire, so he needed the money right away. By now, the single most unbelievable part of this story was that this millionaire, who lived in a mansion in Miami Beach, had no access to his own money. Was there no banker he could call? He couldn't afford to pay someone to fly out with money for him? Why in the world would someone like this rely on a lady he had never met to solve his business issues? Nonetheless, on January 25th, Kate went to Western Union and sent $6,900. She only had this money because she received a lump sum payment for her disability. Supposedly, it needed to go to a construction company called Julius Berger in Lagos, Nigeria. Specifically, it needed to go to a guy in Nigeria. Somebody by this name does have a Facebook and lives in Nigeria. When Kate tried to send the money Western Union, they would not let her because it was too suspicious. She spent hours at Western Union trying to send him money, but finally gave up. Needless to say, Williams was furious. In a show of trust, Williams would send his children to stay with us, though he needed the money first so he could buy the plane tickets. The children would arrive in our hometown on Friday, January 27th at 2 p.m. He would send an arriving flight number, but he needed the money that day to pay for the flight. When Kate asked for proof that he had purchased plane tickets, he sent the following boarding passes, which were fake. There are so many things wrong, it's funny. The American Airlines logo on the boarding passes hasn't been used since 2013. Both children are seated in the same seat on the airline passes. There is no flight direct from Lagos to our hometown. There are no first class seats way in the back row, and there's no flight number on the tickets. We even took these passes down to the airport to ask an American Airlines person, and of course, they said they were fake. When Kate asked Williams about this fake pass, he said the manager of the hotel had taken care of it and it must have been a mistake. 2 weeks passed. On February 4th, even though the supposed deadline for the contract had long passed, Williams told Kate he had found another friend to pitch in and help with some of the $6,900 he needed. Now she only needed to pay $2,000, this time to someone in Boston. She tried to do it online, and Western Union immediately called Kate's cell phone and told her it was too suspicious and they refused. Thank you again, Western Union. By the way, if we could get online and do this, why couldn't Williams do the same with his own credit card? It was now abundantly clear to me that this was a scam. At the time, I was not familiar with the idea of scamming and catfishing, but along the way it was clear to me that this guy must have stolen pictures of someone and kids and used them to pretend to be someone he was not. At this point, she was willing to believe that there was no Williams Humphrey, that this guy was a scammer. She was more willing to look at more evidence against him. I just wanted to get this jerk out of our lives. Nonetheless, she continued to message with him. He started then calling via Facebook Messenger rather than using a cell phone number. I had learned about Tin Eye in Google Images and sent several pictures of him through these platforms but got no hits. I wanted to find out who the real guy in the photo was, but I could not. Sometime in mid March 2017, he called her, and I heard them arguing about why he had not sent the children. She was using speakerphone on her iPad. When I came to the door, she said, "Here's Carl," and I lost it. I've never yelled and cursed at anyone before. I yelled at him to get out of our lives and told him we have no money. Later, Kate was angry at me and she said that Williams was embarrassed for me. I could not believe she still believed he was real. We talked seriously about divorce. If I had to lose my wife of 26 years just to get this scumbag out of my life, then I was willing to do it. Here is when I wanted him dead. That would solve everything, I thought. On March 29th, he said he would send the kids. He sent this ridiculous itinerary. This includes, for some reason, separate flight numbers for each child and apparently 4 days in the air. Turkish Airlines, of course, did not serve our hometown. When we looked up these flight numbers, they consisted of back and forth flights between Istanbul and Amsterdam. They do not fly out of Lagos, Nigeria, or any other airport where he said. Again, I have changed our hometown to protect our identity. When Kate asked Williams about all these inconsistencies, he said before he could send the real itinerary, but we needed to pay for a police report. Why? I yelled. Can we not get a real itinerary? Why send a fake one? Why in the world is she not asking these questions? The police report was for him to make sure that Kate did not have a police record. Amazingly, the police report would cost exactly $1,000. Of course, we had a deadline to get this done within a couple hours. No time to investigate or research. A colleague of his in Tennessee would make sure it got done, so we needed to transfer money to a certain woman at a U.S. bank in Tennessee. He sent the routing and account numbers. I later learned that these scammers use unwitting victims as mules. She was undoubtedly a victim and a mule. Kate agreed that if we send this money and if he came up with another excuse for not sending the kids, then she would be through with this guy forever. She promised me that she would block him again forever. Of course, I knew that there were no kids, so she would have to come up with some other reason not to send it. I saw the $1,000 in a small price to pay to get this guy out of our lives. I went to Wells Fargo and transferred the money to Tennessee. She took a picture of the bank receipt and sent it to him to prove the money was sent. The next day, a few hours before the flight was to leave, he called Kate and said the kids were in the embassy. For them to fly there, they needed to have $4,000 put into the account. This was to cover a flight back in case no one showed up to pick the kids up. She needed to immediately send $4,000. She would get the money back when the kids landed safely. Only after receiving this payment would the embassy let them fly to her. Fortunately, she did not have $4,000, and she said she could not send it, so she could not see the kids. When I found out, I was livid at this guy again, even though I knew he would not be satisfied with $1,000. At least I knew that Kate would do as she promised and blocked him for good. It was clear to me that repeatedly calling Kate mom was a psychological tactic to have her feel closer to the kids. A few days later, I was in the bedroom and her phone was ringing and it was him. He called her this time through Hangouts. I told her that she had said she would block him. It turns out that even after the bogus itinerary, the last minute plea for $4,000, even after all these deceptions, she still believed he was telling the truth and that he was going to send the children to visit. She broke her promise to me. The worst part was her attitude about it. She said, "So I broke my promise, so what?" This was the end of our marriage. She had become someone I did not recognize. After that, I was unable to sleep. All I could think about was how I could expose this guy once and for all, but Kate was so blinded and brainwashed by him, she refused to acknowledge the red flags. I worried that after the divorce, he would go on deceiving her out of what little money she has. I couldn't just turn off my love and concern for her because she was being scammed. She called me at work on Monday, April 10th, to tell me she was going to use her credit card to get a cash advance and send $4,000 so that the kids could come for Easter. She needed my help. I told her it didn't matter anymore since we were divorcing and losing the money was a drop in the ocean. She didn't want to get dressed and go to the bank, so she was just wanting to get this over with. I agreed to take my own credit card to the bank, go to Wells Fargo, and I transferred $1,000 before. Williams wanted to talk to me about how he trusted me to take care of his children. It took everything I had to calmly talk with him and tell him, for Kate's sake, who was listening, that I was looking forward to seeing them. Inside, I wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. I was to wire the money to the same person at the U.S. bank account in Tennessee. The employee at the bank remembered me from before. This time he asked lots of questions. He got suspicious and asked for the bank manager's help. I told him that I knew we were being scammed, but I wanted to save my marriage. It felt good just to tell someone what had been happening. The bank called Kate and told her they would not allow me to send the money. There were too many red flags, including the fact that this account in Tennessee was just recently set up. I came home and broke down, crying harder than I can remember ever crying. Kate finally seemed to see what this whole ordeal was doing to me. Nothing has tortured my soul like this. Kate had to convince Williams that the bank did not allow them to transfer the $4,000. He was furious. He blamed me. He sent her instructions on how to get money through an ATM. Kate and I both agreed that he sure seemed anxious to get rid of his kids. Of course, he was only anxious to get the money. After that, I knew she still communicated with him a little, but she said he seemed to have stopped communicating back. Maybe he finally realized we weren't going to send any money and don't have any money. He sure worked hard over many months just to get $1,000. Kate did continue to communicate with Mackenzie through email and Hangouts, and this upset me. It was like she didn't understand that this little girl, or whoever it was part of the scammer team. She was not real. She seemed to start acknowledging that Williams was not real, but she seemed 100% convinced. I knew this whole nightmare could end if I could only find the real person in the photos. I continued searching for the guy in the pictures, and I continued praying that I would find him. But I also continued hating Williams, or whatever his real name was, with all my heart. I did find that the same person's photos had been used in many other scams. I found his photos reported on scammer websites, but there was no indication of the man's real name. One morning, May of 2017, I prayed again. But this time, I prayed for those who persecute you. Could I muster up some compassion, some empathy? This guy was probably raised in a scammer environment. To him, conning was just another job, and he was basically worshipped money, and that he may be the only life he ever knew. In my prayer, I tried to realize this and ask God to have mercy on him and on me for my anger and my hatred. Immediately, I had a thought. Since Kate had been in communication with fake Mackenzie, perhaps there was a clue in what she had sent via an email. I checked Kate's email, which I don't like to do for her own privacy, but indeed, there was a new email from Mackenzie. She had sent a selfie. I sent this photo through Google Images, and there it was. The photo existed in an Instagram account as well as a fake Facebook account, both under the same name. I went to the Instagram site and finally found all the photos and videos I had ever seen and that scammer had sent to Kate. The real guy had his own YouTube channel. He lived in Florida. He was not an engineer. One video was of him sitting in his car and warning that scammers were stealing his photos and videos to scam women. That was it. That was what I had been searching for all these months. When I shared this all with Kate, she finally woke up and was livid. She called the scammer. He said something like, "I can explain." She finally blocked him on Facebook, though he kept trying to contact her via Hangouts. The nightmare was over. A whole year later, he sent a message saying they were finally coming back to the United States and could she send some money to help them back. So, we were to believe that this millionaire, who had now gone 2 years without access to any of his own money, I believe this was a different scammer who took over the Williams persona. His English was much worse, and he wrote as though he didn't know that Kate knew he was a scammer. Afterwards, Kate kept getting friend requests. With her opened eyes, she is able to identify a scammer right away. She has had 3 friend requests, all using the same photos of Dr. Samadi. Through sites like yours, the both of us are well educated and grateful. One day, she found that 17 Nigerians were following her. She blocked them all. She still gets the occasional, "I was searching for a friend on Facebook and found your picture," but now she knows to block, block, and block. Thank you for letting me share my story. And we'd like to thank this gentleman for sharing his ordeal that him and his wife had with this scammer. And keep in mind that scammers do come back with new names, new profiles, and they come back to old victims. So if you've let a scammer with a fake profile into your friends list and you block him, he may come back as just somebody new just to try and continue to talk with you. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you need help, you can find us on Facebook under Scanning Scammers Action. We'll see you next time. Bye.